Decarbonising commercial vehicles is not going to be a light switch event with one answer. It will be a long journey, and the wide diversity of truck applications will drive a range of technology solutions. We believe that there are three key enabling factors for the industry to succeed in its green transition. These are infrastructure, regulation, and skills.
The key to accelerating adoption in the commercial sector is competitively priced vehicles that come pre-integrated with software and energy solutions. The fleet owners need those new solutions to solve this complex equation.
One option to accelerate the uptake of zero-emission vehicles is for the government to offer end users a stronger financial stimulus for purchasing electric vehicles, similar to what we've seen in Germany, which can help the market grow, benefit from economies of scale, and eventually become self-sustaining.
Okay, joining me up here you've already seen them on the screen, Peter Ahrens from Leyland Trucks, Jonathan Atkinson from Cummins, and Bruno Lambert, the Chief Executive Officer of Be.ON. Can I start, Jonathan, with you and the sort of global picture, or at least the picture in different markets? Are we seeing different trends in different markets, or is it one trend, one overall trend that everyone is moving around? What's actually going on?
Yeah, good morning, Justin. I don't think we can say we've identified the trends globally, but the direction of travel is absolutely clear. So we know where we're headed in the commercial vehicle industry. It's worth saying that, we talked about the passenger car industry before the break. The commercial vehicle industry is somewhat different. We're talking everything from large vans to heavy goods vehicles, so a really, really wide diversity of vehicles. And that wide diversity of vehicles covers an almost infinite range of different missions. So we've got lots of different vehicles, lots of different use cases for those vehicles, and as a result, it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all technology solution.
Yeah. And very different markets too. I mean, that's the obvious point, I suppose.
Really different markets. Yeah. And in all of those major markets, the US, Europe, China, India, which are the four major commercial vehicle markets around the globe, we have really aggressive CO2 legislation heading towards us.
Yeah.
So against the benchmark of today, by 2030, there's an expectation that we reduce CO2 by 2030, and in Europe, 45%. So it's a huge decarbonisation challenge which is coming towards the industry.
Right. Tell us, Peter, about that challenge in the UK.
We're just starting to decarbonize heavy goods transport in the UK. We're probably 5 to 10 years behind the automotive industry with battery electric vehicles. All the OEs, including DAF or Leyland Trucks, are producing vehicles, but customers are still very much in an early adopter phase, buying 1, 2, up to 5 vehicles at a time to get familiar with the technology. But no one at this point is really pulling the trigger to transition their fleets completely to a zero-emission technology. And we're going to need to see a significant acceleration in demand if we are going to hit those decarbonization targets.
What is it that's stopping them?
The biggest thing is vehicle price, and that's my responsibility as an OE, my supplier's responsibility to drive down the vehicle cost. As you saw me mention in the video, that can be accelerated by providing customer incentives similar to what we've seen either in Germany in the commercial vehicle side or right here in the UK on the automotive side with the fleet support and tax breaks that have been provided. We need to see a pull from the market because there's certainly been a significant amount of push on the manufacturers to provide the solution, but ultimately there needs to be a customer at the end of that pipeline.
Okay, and we'll return to a couple of those points. Bruno, tell us about vans.
Yeah, for the vans, I think the transition is already happening a little bit faster than the heavy-duty trucks, but we are still in the low single digits penetration. At the end of the day, that's nothing compared to passenger vehicles. So I think, again, the entry price, businesses cannot afford plus 30, plus 40% cost on the vehicle to just transition to electric. They have to be able to manage already low margins for most of them. And we need to lower this price, and we need also to accompany them to lower to benefit from the lower energy cost if they go electric, because it's not a simple equation. When a driver suddenly drives electric in his shift and he has to manage himself the charging, sometimes he will pay 5 times more than what he could do if this was really organized as an ecosystem. So that's also what we really want to focus on.
Yeah. Okay, well, Jonathan, that brings us then to the infrastructure and where we are with that.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure is going to be absolutely critical. I talked about the decarbonisation hurdle that's coming towards us. As an industry, we know what the range of solutions are. Yeah. Electrification is going to be definitely a big part of it. I think hydrogen is going to be a feature of the commercial vehicle industry, low carbon fuels. But we can't be successful with any of those technologies without a clear path to the infrastructure which supports them. So EV infrastructure for the passenger car industry is clearly something that we've still got to work through, as we talked about before the break.
Yeah.
If you think about commercial vehicles, typically they would be recharged. Lots of commercial vehicles would be recharging together beside the motorway or in depots. So there's some big electrical infrastructure questions to answer there.
Yeah, I mean, it feels, I have to say that what I pick up from people in conversations is that a lot of the conversations are, I'm not going to say unrealistic, but the ask is being made and has been made actually for some years, and the response has not necessarily been there. And we'll be talking this afternoon about having a new government, if indeed we have got a new government, et cetera, et cetera. But I kind of feel among commercial vehicles that idea that you've got everything charging in the same place, you know what you want to achieve, it's kind of enclosed, but it's the actual grid, it's the really physical, practical problem, isn't it, of getting the electricity to the place.
The grid's going to be a real challenge, and the commercial vehicle industry is extremely pragmatic. People are buying trucks to make money.
Yeah.
So how the infrastructure works, where the infrastructure is placed, has to be well designed so that it supports everybody's logistics operation.
Yeah.
If the infrastructure is in the wrong place, you have to take a detour, you have to take time out to recharge the vehicle or refuel the vehicle, that's not going to be commercially viable for the industry.
The only thing that I'd like to add on that is the price of electricity at public charging is unacceptable when it comes to a haulier standpoint. I drive a battery electric vehicle. 90 plus pence at a fast charger is not going to fly with someone running a business.
Yeah.
So you have a huge challenge of both deploying a huge amount of infrastructure, but also making it cost effective.
Yeah. And what is the solution then to that? I mean,
I would love to give you that solution. I'd have made a lot of money if I had that solution in my pocket.
Yeah. Someone during a break said they would buy me a pint if I asked, which hospital will you close in order to provide the money for a better infrastructure? So I've now asked that question. I get the pint. I also put a bet on myself asking the question, which I now...
The second pint.
Good. So I get a second pint in a way from that. But the asks that you're making are clear, aren't they? The answers are not clear.
No, the answers are not clear and they're not easy.
Yeah. You've also been doing trials, haven't you, on
Absolutely.
HGVs? Can you tell us anything about those? Tell us a few trade secrets, if you will.
So we participated in the BET trial, which was put on by the Department for Transportation. Great trial. We were able to provide the NHS with several battery electric vehicles to get real-world use cases and see the performance of the vehicles. The performance of the vehicles was very strong, exactly what we expected. Very happy about that. And it gave our customers the opportunity to get their hands on an electric vehicle, ensure that the route management was appropriate, ensure that the infrastructure could support the use case. So very pleased. We will also be entering a new trial here in the next few months, and we're going to expand it to more vehicles, more applications, so both long range and vocational applications, and hopefully in the future participate in more trials with other technologies. If we start seeing hydrogen combustion become an option in the UK, I could see that being a future trial.
That is
as well.
interesting. So these are trials. I mean, this is more than an academic thing, isn't it? You are intending it leads to genuine
It's
progress.
both important for us, just to prove out our technology and see how our customers use it, but it's just as important that our customers get the opportunity to put their hands on these vehicles and gain confidence. We talked a lot about myth busting in a previous panel, but there's a lot of perception about whether vehicle configurations can be supported, whether the range is appropriate for the use cases, and whether they can utilize the vehicles in their fleets. So, huge benefit.
When it comes to myth busting and the complexity that people often think, oh my goodness, I can't deal with all of that. What's your business model? How do you deal with all that from your perspective when you're dealing with people and doing a job of persuasion, essentially?
Yeah, so my company had a chance to acquire 2.5 years ago a subsidiary of DHL, which was running the largest fleet of electric commercial trucks in Europe, with about 20,000 vehicles and 3,000 charging depots. So I would insist on the 3,000 charging depot because that's a key part of the equation, which, as we just said, makes it actually a real saving on energy, not a burden of trying to find a charger and trying to lose productivity and so on. So if you really integrate the full solution with the ecosystem, like DHL started doing 10 years ago, you really can prove a TCO gain for the businesses, which does not yet maybe fully offset a cost increase of the vehicle of 30 to 40%, but if we work on both sides, on the ecosystem solution and on a lower cost of the vehicle, we actually can offer a real business value, and which the businesses will recognize, and then it will become a no-brainer without too much subsidies, because anyway we know that the current political landscape is also challenging all the subsidies left and right in many countries. So that's, we have to create as a business a real value proposal for our B2B customers to transition to electric.
We ought to mention other technologies as well, Jonathan, I suppose. I think you mentioned hydrogen earlier on. What's the place of other technologies in all of this?
I think, again, it's another sort of peculiarity of the commercial vehicle market. So the Pascal panel earlier said, yep, electrification is clearly the answer. Electrification is clearly a big part of the answer for commercial vehicles, but it will not work for all use cases. Longer distances, you're always trading off the weight of the batteries with the weight of the payload. It doesn't work for all operators. So we've got conventional ICE technology, hybrid, low carbon fuels, but hydrogen is that additional energy vector which could really be part of the solution.
Are we getting anywhere with hydrogen? Because I feel we've talked about it 2 or 3 years running at these conferences. I mean, what progress is being made?
From a technology perspective, we're investing, as Cummins, we're investing really heavily in hydrogen. We're spending a lot on fuel cell research and fuel cell deployment. That's a really promising technology, but it's still somewhat in its infancy, and there are challenges as we deploy that at scale in the industry. The other key hydrogen technology is hydrogen internal combustion engine. So again, it's something we're investing heavily in. It's something that we plan to have fully commercialized well within this decade. And that is a very pragmatic midterm step towards a hydrogen fuel solution for commercial vehicles.
Right, yeah. Can we talk about price parity, but also kind of the total cost of a vehicle over its lifetime? What at the moment are you saying to customers about it? What do you need to be able to say?
Customers need to be able to have home or depot charging in order to make the TCO work.
Yeah.
As we've mentioned, if you're using public charging, then it's just not going to be economically viable. So it really depends on the customer and what they can support and what their routes look like for their vehicles. Can they get back home every night to charge?
Right. And then when you look at the total life cost of a vehicle, can you make comparisons there that are useful and pull people or push people in a particular direction?
Absolutely. but you're going to be leveraging every subsidy, and you're going to be leveraging home charging to make it work for the customer.
Yeah. And in the van space?
Yeah, again, it comes down to the ecosystem solution. We have proven from our data that you can save up to 20% of the overall lifetime cost on the vehicle if you have a charging depot which is set up in the right way, if you have the routes which are selected for that to some extent, because on the infrastructure you cannot actually have an economic solution for every route, every solution, every depot. Some of them do not have the grid supply, which means that the investment required would just be too high to upgrade to electric. So it's not a one-step approach, but the solution can work with up to 20% cost saving.
And we get to, I mean, this is not necessarily a political question, it's just a practical question, Peter. To what extent does alignment with European legislation from the UK space, to what extent does that matter? What difference does it make, can it make?
It's absolutely critical, especially when we start talking about hydrogen. The logistics networks are interconnected. You can't just stop all European vehicles from entering the UK. And so if you allow European hauliers to have access to a more economically efficient hydrogen technology, it's going to create potential problems for local businesses if we force them into a more expensive solution.
So how do we design our legislation, or do we design our legislation entirely with regard to that, or are there things that can happen here, do you think, separately that matter?
I think as we approach potentially a new government, potentially, what we really need is close partnership between the government, the legislators, and the industry to come up with pragmatic legislative solutions that really are technology agnostic.
Yeah.
I've talked a couple of times about this wide diversity of potential solutions for decarbonisation in our industry, and the legislation can't exclude any of those solutions. The market has to find its place.
Yeah.
So we need that technology agnostic approach, and that legislation does need to be aligned and informed by the European legislation, because ultimately for commercial vehicles we're a relatively small market.
Are you optimistic, actually? I mean, seriously, that it can be done? I mean, if we are to get a new government coming in, Labour government, with an awful lot that they want to do and achieve, and a lot on their plate, are you optimistic, not from the politics of it, but just from the practicalities of it, that the things that you all say need to be done actually will be done, that there will be the bandwidth for this stuff?
Yeah, I think there is. To your point, it's practicality. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to make the appropriate investments and to align with Europe on the legislative side. So I don't think there's too many options when it comes to the path forward. And to Jonathan's point, the regulators, the industry, and the customers are all going to go down the same path together.
Jonathan, you agree?
Yeah, I'm also optimistic. Our commercial vehicle legislation and market has always been aligned with Europe, and I think it can continue to be aligned with Europe, and the European regulations now are well structured, and in the UK we need to get on with it and make that alignment happen.
Bruno?
I think we need to keep the course because momentum has been already happening to some extent on the willingness to transition for all the fleets. Really, I mean, there are more RFQs which are being issued every day, and sometimes they are being cancelled because the economic proposal is not yet working for them, but at least the willingness is there. And yes, the government needs to support. It's not only the government. We need to bring more value to the table, because no business can afford to just transition and get a 20% cost increase on their P&L. There is just no chance for that.
Well, actually, that was going to be my sort of set of questions for you. I'll throw it open to the audience. If anyone's got any questions, we've got a second or two for questions from all of us. And I just have this kind of sense of, I mean, a lot of people have been talking about what the government needs to do, and plainly there are things government needs to do, and that only government can do. And we've heard a lot about those during the course of the morning so far. Are there things that the industry needs to do and perhaps isn't doing quite as well as it should do at the moment? You know, to what extent does the responsibility also lie on you as companies?
There's a huge amount of responsibility on us, and that's why we're making massive investments, not just in battery electric. To Jonathan's point, battery electric is absolutely part of the future. We're rolling out new models all the time, but we're also investing in hydrogen fuel cell. To answer your question earlier, what's happening with hydrogen? We're going to be the first people to commercialize hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. That'll be launching next year in the US, 2025. We're also making investments in hydrogen combustion, and we will have a full suite of options for our customers depending on what routes they run, depending on what the infrastructure looks like in their local area, to make sure they have the ability to transition to a zero-emission solution.
John?
Yeah, similar to Packard, Peter's company, we're investing in all of these technologies. So my day job is to figure out how these technologies are going to roll out in different regions. And I am convinced we have to invest in all of these vectors and have them ready for the end of the decade. The challenge for industry is we can't afford to invest in everything everywhere. So longer term clarity on the legislation, real clarity on state energy policy, which ultimately is going to drive the infrastructure, is super important to help us prepare.
Anyone got any questions for our panelists? Any of them, or indeed all of them? Yes, we've got one right here. Hang on a second. We'll get a microphone to you. Just keep going down then everyone will be able to hear. Here we go.
Thank you. Richard Scott, Advanced Electric Machines. Is there any way that the panel can see us transitioning the UK fleet buyers away from their predilection for 4x2 tractor units, so we can have parity with Europe?
Okay. It's one for you to start with, Peter.
Well, I do very well in the 4x2 sector, so no, absolutely not. I think the situation in the UK encourages the use of smaller, more maneuverable vehicles, certainly compared to the US, but even compared to a lot of areas of Europe. So I think the smaller 19-ton vehicles especially are where we're going to see the majority of the volume, even moving forward.
Anyone else with a view on that?
All I would say is, as we look at the whole decarbonisation journey, we've talked a lot about the technologies and the vehicle technologies and the infrastructure. I think it's inevitable that changes in the logistics industry are going to occur, which will support this transition. So maybe that's a space where types of vehicles used, let's say, transition over time, but that's going to be part of the development process.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yes, gentleman here, if we can pass the microphone back up. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Fine.
Simon Godwin from Finia. So there's zero emission targets for heavy duty vehicles for 2035, 2040, but there isn't yet a ZEV mandate or anything in the interim period. So what do you think there could be or should be in that interim period for commercial vehicles?
Well, so currently we have a 2030 target of a 43% reduction in CO2, and I'm trying to remember what next year's target is. Is it 20?
It's 20 versus 2019.
20 versus 2019.
Yep.
So we already have very aggressive CO2 reductions. Well, it's not technically a ZEV mandate. It requires us to sell a significant number of zero-emission vehicles to hit that target. So I'm already quite stretched when it comes to hitting those targets.
Will you hit them?
Excuse me?
Will you hit them?
We'll see in a couple of years.
Jonathan?
I don't think I really have anything to add to that. We're already on the journey. It's super challenging, and the targets for 2030 at 40-something%. It's incredibly ambitious.
Do you think there's a chance? Do you think the targets will change? Do you think governments will say actually, or is there going to be a conversation that leads to?
There is a conversation written into the 2030 legislation, and there's potential for a review period in I think late 2026 at a European level, and a lot of that is going to be about how the rollout is happening and how the infrastructure is being prepared.
Bruno, your perspective?
Yeah, I'm all electric company, so it's easier for me to achieve the target. But no, I think the target as an industry requires real cooperation between all the stakeholders. And just one word, because my company has a joint venture with a leading Chinese OEM, Chery, and for me that was one way to bridge the gap, is to work with the Chinese, not trying to protect ourselves from the Chinese, because it's just for BEVs, maybe less for hydrogen, but for BEVs, there just no other way. The battery costs in China right now are half or even sometimes 1/3 of what I know the costs are for some of the manufacturers in Europe. So we need to leverage that and bring those solutions to our customers here.
Do you feel
together
that the politics is going in the other direction?
I mean, again, if we all think that we are going to lose our jobs because the Chinese are going to import their cars in Europe and UK, then we need to have some way to protect our industries, for sure. I understand that. But the Chinese are not here to steal the jobs of Europeans. They are here to make some business with some IPs they developed. So there is also a way to cooperate and bring also value here. But the reality is, in BEVs today, there is just, in my opinion, after living 10 years in China, no way to do it without cooperation with the Chinese, because there is just too much cost advantage. And if we don't work with them, we will step even further behind, because if consumers and fleets in the next 5 years are not getting cheaper BEVs in Europe and UK, there will be less demand, there will be less investment in charging infrastructure, and less justification to transition, and we will just miss our zero-emission targets, and we will just step even further behind the Chinese manufacturers. So it's not an option, in my opinion. We have to find a way to work with them, bring the vehicles in Europe, but bring the plants in Europe, bring everything in a way that it's really a win-win relationship, but leveraging the efforts which have been done. The good news is that 2 years ago, we were worried about the raw material prices, which were impacted the battery cost, and now they all came down to the even lower level than before COVID, and we are in a very, very competitive situation. We are talking about batteries today in China, which are being quoted for cost below 50 pounds per kilowatt hour at a pack level. Okay, so this is for some of the people who work in our industry, a reality check which needs to happen, because closer to us here, we are talking about double or triple this cost.
Yeah. There was a question over here, a couple of questions actually, and then we'll wrap it up. So if I can get a microphone down to this gentleman in the front with the white shirt, here we go.
You mentioned that the targets for ZEV vehicles and your sales are very challenging. When you talk to your end customers, what is the main obstacle for them in buying them off you?
It's always going to be vehicle price. Again, that's my responsibility, my supplier's responsibility to help drive that down. And then charging. You can think of especially the heavy end of the commercial vehicle segment as probably being 5 to 10 years behind the automotive sector when it comes to both customer demand and also maturity of the product. So we have a lot of work to do to continue driving down our upfront price to our customers, and then continuing to make it easier for them to charge their vehicles, more cost-effective to charge their vehicles, so we can improve the TCO.
John?
It's back to this thing, people are buying trucks to make money. So they're buying a truck running on relatively thin margins in the transport industry, and we have to be sure that the technology solutions we bring are pragmatic and allow them to continue to make money. So it's not just about the health of the commercial vehicle industry, it's about the health of the logistics industry, which relies on the technology solutions that we bring.
Yeah. And Bruno?
Yeah, I think we are all promoting the same thing. Ecosystem solution and productive solution for B2B customers are key, with better hardware and technology at a competitive price. So we are getting there, and that's the good news. We really have vehicles now which are becoming really competitive, payload mix, cost mix, range mix, which was not the case a few years back. Okay, so that's really, for fleets, the good news is that they can really get solutions today, but they need to work on a comprehensive ecosystem as well, which depend on their use case. And as we just said, the margins are thin, so it need to be a real study to make sure they can deliver.
Have I missed any questions? Does anyone have something they burningly want to ask? Yes, run right at the back, and then we will carry on to other things. Here we go.
Andy Latham from Salvage Wire. These alternative fuel vehicles have large batteries. They have inverters, electric motors, fuel cells, or whatever. How are the manufacturers designing recyclability into their products so that when they reach end of life, these products can be recycled and recycled effectively and efficiently?
Jonathan?
It's we talked earlier, it's part of everybody's ethos. It's not just about the use case where we're lowering or decarbonizing, it's about the whole product life cycle. So inherently, as we develop these technologies, that's been taken into account. I mean, one interesting thing, if you look at an internal combustion engine, it's actually highly recyclable, which is a strange paradox in this space. But we have to get to the same place for fuel cell technology and battery technology.
How far down the road are you?
For things like fuel cell, probably in its infancy, because it's still, as I said, a new technology. For battery technology, we can look at what the past car industry is doing. As Peter said, they're a few years ahead of commercial vehicle industry, and we can learn from those techniques.
Peter?
The only thing that I'd like to add is that, again, this isn't a new situation, that it's not unique to battery electric or hydrogen vehicles. We're trying to improve the recyclability of all our vehicles. DAF has produced an environmental sustainability report, and you can actually see where our recyclable content currently is and then where we're trying to get to.
Right. Okay, we must leave it there. A huge round of applause, please, for Peter, Jonathan, and Bruno. Thank you all. Thank you.